There is a box in your parents' attic, or your basement, or the back of a closet you have not opened since you moved out. Inside that box, buried under old Christmas decorations and high school yearbooks, there is a smaller shoebox, and inside that shoebox are action figures from your childhood. You have not looked at them in 20 years. You assume they are worth nothing. Toys, plastic, kids' stuff. You would be right about 99% of them. But here is what you do not know. In August 2024, a single Star Wars action figure sold at auction for $1.34 million. One figure, 3¾ inches of plastic. It was a Boba Fett that was never supposed to be sold to the public. Only about 30 of his kind were ever made, and just a handful survive today. The version that sold for over $1 million was pulled from a manufacturing test batch in 1979 before it could be destroyed. But that is the prototype. That is the extreme. That is not what is hiding in your parents' attic. The ones that are hiding in your parents' attic are the production figures, the ones that were sold by the millions. And some of them, the ones that looked like mistakes at the time, are now worth thousands, tens of thousands. $161,000 for a Luke Skywalker. The most valuable toy on the planet might not be behind glass in a museum. It might be in a shoebox you have not opened since 1983. In the fall of 1977, Kenner Products had a problem that would be unthinkable today. Star Wars had opened in May. It was the biggest movie anyone had ever seen. Kids across America wanted lightsabers and X-Wings and action figures. And Kenner had signed the toy license too late to manufacture anything in time for Christmas. So Kenner did something that had never been done before. They sold an empty box, the early bird certificate package. Price, $7.99. Inside, a cardboard display stand, a Star Wars Club membership card, and a mail-in certificate that promised the first 4 action figures would arrive by early the next year. They sold an IOU for Christmas, 1977. And it worked. Hundreds of thousands of families wrapped empty boxes and put them under the tree. By early 1978, the figures started arriving. The first 4 were Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, R2-D2, and Chewbacca, then the rest over the following months. Han Solo, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi, C-3PO, the Stormtrooper, the Sand People, the Jawa, the Death Squad Commander, who would later be renamed. 12 figures total, sold for roughly $2 to $3 each at retail. The first wave, the 12-back series, named for the 12 figures pictured on the back of the card. Those figures are the foundation of the most valuable toy line in history, and the mistakes Kenner made in those first months of production, the errors they corrected before anyone noticed. Those are the figures now worth a fortune. When the first shipments of the original 12 figures hit stores, the Jawa figure arrived wearing a small brown cape. The cape was vinyl, shiny, plastic. It looked cheap against the soft fabric goods of the other figures. It did not drape over the figure's shoulders naturally. And Kenner had a second problem. The vinyl cape was thin enough that the figure looked less substantial than its low price already suggested, and collectors believe Kenner worried it cheapened the toy. Kenner made the switch quietly. Within the first few months of production, they replaced the vinyl cape with a cloth one. The change happened so early that almost no one noticed. The vinyl cape Jawa disappeared from store shelves before most kids even knew it existed. Today, the vinyl cape Jawa is one of the rarest production Star Wars figures in existence. In 2023, a carded vinyl Cape Jawa sold at a UK auction for £21,000, roughly $26,000. A loose figure, removed from the card and played with, can sell for $2,000 to $3,000 depending on condition. The cloth Cape Jawa that replaced it is worth maybe $20 or $30. The figure is identical. The sculpt is the same. The paint is the same. Only the cape material changed. But that is not the rarest variant in the original 12. That distinction belongs to a feature Kenner designed on purpose, and then abandoned before most of the figures got made. When Kenner engineered the first Luke Skywalker figure, they designed a two-piece telescoping lightsaber. A thin inner blade slid out of the outer handle to extend to full length. It was clever, it was screen accurate, and it was expensive to manufacture, because the two pieces had to fit together precisely, and the assembly was slow. Kenner abandoned the design almost instantly. They replaced it with a single-piece lightsaber that cost less, assembled faster, and looked nearly identical inside the bubble. The double telescoping saber appeared only on early production runs. It was never sold at retail in large numbers. Only 3 characters received the double telescoping saber before the changeover: Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Luke is the most common of the 3 because he was part of the early bird set, so Kenner had time to make more of him. Vader and Obi-Wan are rarer, much rarer. In August 2025, a 12-back Luke Skywalker graded AFA 90, one of only 2 ever graded that high, with none higher, with a fully extended double telescoping lightsaber still visible inside the sealed bubble, sold at auction for $161,458. A few months earlier, a double telescoping Darth Vader, even rarer than Luke, sold for $130,095. And in 2018, an Obi-Wan Kenobi with the double telescoping saber sold for around $76,000, a record for a production Star Wars figure at the time. These are not prototypes. They are not one-of-a-kind engineering samples. They are production figures that came out of the same factories, shipped in the same cases, and sat on the same toy store shelves as the ones that sold for $2.99. The only difference is a half-inch of plastic inside the lightsaber, but the most valuable Star Wars figure ever made was never sold in a store at all. In 1979, Kenner planned to release a Boba Fett action figure with a working rocket-launching backpack. The rocket would fire out of a slot on Fett's back when a button was pressed. A working projectile on a 3 3/4-inch figure. The ads ran on the back of Star Wars figure cards. Kids mailed in proofs of purchase to reserve theirs. Then a different toy company, Mattel, had a problem with a Battlestar Galactica toy that fired a small missile. There were reports of a child choking and at least 1 death. The toy industry panicked. Kenner killed the rocket-firing feature immediately. The Boba Fett that shipped to customers had a fixed, non-firing rocket molded into the backpack. The mail-away figure was a compromise. Safe, ordinary. But before the feature was killed, Kenner had manufactured approximately 100 working prototypes. They were produced in 2 variants: the L-slot mechanism, roughly 70 units, and the later J-slot mechanism, roughly 30 units, redesigned to make the rocket harder to fire by accident. These prototypes were never sold to the public. They were engineering samples, safety test figures, and concept models. Most were destroyed when the feature was cancelled. The survivors were saved by employees who took them home. In May 2024, a hand-painted L-slot Boba Fett prototype, sold at heritage auctions for $525,000. It was one of the rarest hand-painted examples known. A few months later, in August 2024, a J-slot Boba Fett prototype sold for $1.34 million, becoming the most expensive vintage toy in history. Only about 30 J-slot prototypes were ever made, and only a handful are known to survive. You will not find one in your parents' attic. That is not the point of this story. The point is what the Boba Fett prototypes prove. The Star Wars figure market is not just nostalgia. It is not only people reliving their childhoods. It is a market where individual figures trade for 6 and 7 figures. And the ones that reach those prices almost always share the same pattern. If you grew up with Star Wars figures, you had dozens of them. You opened them, you played with them, you lost the weapons, you broke the limbs. Most loose figures, even from the original 12, are worth $10 to $40 today. A complete set of the first 12 figures, loose and in good condition with their weapons, sells for perhaps $300 to $500. That is the realistic outcome for most childhood collections, but there are exceptions that hide in plain sight. A blue Snaggletooth figure, for example. The character only appeared in the Mos Eisley Cantina for a moment. The standard figure had a red outfit, but Kenner produced a blue variant exclusively for a Sears Cantina adventure set, only available through Sears. And they got the design wrong because they were working from incomplete reference material. A loose blue Snaggletooth in good condition sells for several $100s. Carded examples are worth thousands. A vinyl Cape Jawa, a double telescoping Luke, a blue Snaggletooth. These are not exotic prototypes stored in a vault. They are the figures sold at Toys R Us and Sears and Kmart, alongside every other Star Wars toy. The difference is that someone, somewhere, noticed they were different. Here is the pattern, and by now you have seen it on this channel enough times to recognize it before I say it. A company makes a change to cut costs. The original version becomes rare. The rare version becomes valuable. And for decades, the difference between the rare version and the common version sits in a box in an attic, invisible to the people who own it. This is the 1943 copper penny all over again. The mint switched to steel for 1 year. A few bronze blanks got through, and now a single penny is worth $456,000. It is the dust jacket on The Great Gatsby that everyone threw away because it was just the wrapper. It is the sealed Super Mario cartridge worth millions because nobody thought cardboard packaging would matter. The vinyl Cape Jawa is worth thousands because Kenner thought vinyl looked cheap. The double telescoping Luke is worth $161,000 because Kenner wanted to save a few cents per unit on assembly. The Boba Fett prototype is worth over $1 million because a company got scared of a lawsuit and destroyed almost everything. Value hides in what people discard without looking, and toy companies discard things constantly. Early production runs, misprinted packaging, features that cost too much, mistakes they fix quietly before the public notices. Every single one of those discards is a potential treasure. Money is a tool. It is not an identity. But attention is the difference between listing a shoebox of old toys for $20 and knowing what is actually inside it. So here is the question. If you went to your parents' attic tonight, found that shoebox, and looked at every figure inside, would you know which capes were vinyl and which were cloth? Would you check the lightsabers to see if they extend twice? Would you flip the figures over to read the copyright stamps on the legs? Subscribe to Money Fails, real stories, real mistakes, real lessons. because a 14-year-old found a $456,000 penny in his pocket change, and a vinyl cape Jawa that sold for $26,000 came out of the same factory as the cloth cape one worth $20. The only difference was someone looked. See you in the next one.